Islam is the umbrella, and from Islam comes a heavy dosage called Islamism. It means when you install more Islam in the daily life, and when you conduct your entire life according to Islam in every aspect, you become a jihadist. There is a clear hierarchy. You have to be Muslim first to be an Islamist. It is embedded in Islam. The economic system of Islam is embedded in the idea of ghazw, of raids, of wars and war spoils. Applying that to every Islamic empire that came after him, that was the main source of income. That you raid the neighboring areas, you take the gold and the girls. And this was a unique chance for the Islamic world to join modernity, understand the lesson that you cannot find solutions in the past. But they insist again and again that it's the best that humanity have ever brought up. And this is exactly the link between Islamism and fascism. The obsession with the idea of purity.
We restrict ourselves from criticizing Muslims. And we restrict ourselves from criticizing Muslims because we've been taught that that's a bad thing to do, that's Islamophobic, that's bigoted, etc., etc. That is the bigger problem. And when we protect Islam and Muslims from any kind of criticism, what we're basically doing is we're fossilizing them in, 1400 years ago. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 2 for Islam in the West. Today, we have someone who is actually a personal hero of mine. Today, we have Mohammed Abdel Samad. Mohammed is an Egyptian-German hero who has written a book called Islamic Fascism. And he joins me today to shed light on the Muslim Brotherhood. Mohammed was born in Egypt to a Sunni Muslim Imam and became a member of the Muslim Brotherhood in his university days. So we're going to discuss the origin of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, how they perfected their ideological tactics throughout the Middle East, and how Muslim Brotherhood, as well as other Islamists, are using those tactics on you throughout the West today. Mohammed, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's an absolute honor to have you here.
Thank you, Yasmine. Thank you for having me.
So let's start off by talking a little bit about your background. Can you tell us about growing up in Egypt? Your father is an imam, and how you ended up joining the Muslim Brotherhood in your university days?
Yes, I grew up in a village in the Nile Delta, and as you mentioned, my father was an imam, a Sunni imam, and I was supposed to walk in his footsteps and become an imam as well. But at the age of 15, I figured out that I don't want to lead this life. I don't want to be another copy of my father. And that had many reasons. I just figured out that my father was not happy with the role he is playing. He was the spiritual imam, the wise man in the mosque, the calm person. But at home, he was the angry man, the frustrated man, the violent man, a man that sometimes had to calm himself with drugs because he couldn't cope with the pressure. And he wanted me to be an imam. And I was learning the Quran by heart, and I was reading the Islamic literature. But I just figured out, I don't want to repeat this life. I don't want to be another copy of my father. At the age of 15, I started learning foreign languages. I started reading literature. I was interested in the world outside the village. I was interested in beautiful girls, and I wanted to go out and discover the world, make my own mistakes and learn from them. And the more I read English literature back then, I figured out I belonged to this world more, the world of anti-heroes, the world of individuals, not the world of collectives. And I faced my father with this fact, but I was surprised that he was disarmed immediately the moment I faced him. I was preparing a long speech to tell him, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to lead this kind of life. And I was just facing him and I told him, I want to study foreign languages and I want to go abroad. I don't want to be spending the rest of my life in this village. I don't want people to come and kiss my hands and ask for advice and for guidance while I myself, I need this advice and I need this guidance. And I didn't find this advice. I didn't find this guidance in you, in your Quran, in your mosque. And I have to search outside of this. I didn't have to say all of this. I just told him, I'm not going to study Islamic studies. I'm not going to be an imam. And he just told me, it's your life. Do with it whatever you want. And the only deal was I have to take care of myself from now on. He's not going to finance my study. He's not going to stand behind me. And I did. I took the risk and I went out and I went to Cairo, a young man, age of 16 and a half. And I was very lonely in the city. And you have to understand something. I think people who grew up in closed society will understand me immediately when I say, in those closed society, conservative societies, we are wired to an entire system. We are wired to an operating system. And this operating system is implanted within us, in our minds and in our psyche. And this operating system can work only in the village or in the closed community or in the cult we grew up within. But once we move to another place, we figure out we need to update this operating system or we need to install a totally different operating system to cope with the modern world, to the outside world. And that's why, after a short time of rebellion, I joined the Marxists in Cairo at the university, and I was like pursuing the issue of social justice and so on. But to my bad luck, just a few weeks after I started studying, after a few weeks after joining the Marxists, the Soviet Union collapsed. It was the year 1989 and 1990. And I became politically homeless again. I wanted to rebel against the system, the closed system of my father, by joining just the opposite. The irreligious, but it was also an ideology. It was also a closed system of thinking. It was also a system that is dividing the world in good and evil. But it didn't last long. And I wanted a big project to give me self-value, to make me seen, to make me feel needed in the society. And that was the time the Muslim Brotherhood showed up. They were very strong, they were very active at the university, and they had a good nose. They knew exactly which individuals they can take. They needed isolated individuals who want to make a change, who come from the countryside, who are not embedded in any social context in Cairo. And I was perfect for them. I was knowing the Quran. My father was an imam. And they had kind of political project that was very attractive to me. They wanted to topple the dictatorship in Egypt, Mubarak at that time, and they wanted to install social justice. And that, for a young man at the age of 18, it's perfect. Like, that's exactly, I came to Cairo at the beginning and I figured out no one sees me, no one needs me, I don't exist, I'm just like air. And all of a sudden, this group shows up and tells me not only the society needs you, but God personally needs you to achieve his plan, to implement his plan on earth. What an empowerment. What a fake empowerment. But you feel you are a part of an avant-garde, of an elite that is not only going to change Egypt, but it's going to change the entire world. That's very appealing for a young man. And this is how the rat hunters are hunting their or chasing the rats, or they're catching the rats.
Mm-hmm. Amazing, Hamid. You did such a great job of explaining to us all of that. What you said about the operating system and all that is, that's something I can relate to as well, because we grow up with such this knowing right and wrong, truth, and everything is so clear, everything is in one book. And so to go from that kind of order to the absolute chaos of there is no one answer. The whole world is a big mystery, and you can, now you have to use your brain and critical thinking and figuring it out yourself is daunting and difficult. So this step into Marxism and then joining the Muslim Brotherhood, those steps make sense. And you also, when you talked about how they hunted you, that reminded me of the ex-husband that they forced me to marry. He was a very similar situation where he grew up in a village and then he was in Cairo, except it was Al-Qaeda that found him and he became a jihadi, but very similar circumstances. They're looking for boys that are looking for purpose, that are looking for belonging. And the way they sell it to them is not only are you needed here on earth, but Allah himself needs you is just it's heroin. They become addicted to that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So because you have so much experience with the Muslim Brotherhood, I want to talk to you. I want you to share with us all about it, because this is a really big topic right now, especially in the US, where they're considering designating the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, as they have been designated in so many Arab countries. So last episode, in episode 1 of Islam in the West, we learned about the history of Islam up until Muhammad's death, pretty much. We learned about how he was, raping and pillaging and was a warlord all across Arabia. And I want to pick it up from that spot right there. And I want to figure out, how did we go from there to here, where we have all these loose categories? Of course, at that point, it was Shia and Sunni. That was the schism. But now we have Muslims, we have Islamists, we have jihadis. People are using all these terms. And I don't think the average person in the West understands the difference between these three terms, or is there a very distinct difference between these three terms? And so I'd like to talk to you about each one of these categories. And within that, if you could talk to us about this ideology of Islamism in general, what is this phenomenon? What is this term? Is it even a valid term? Is it a new modern phenomenon, as experts claim, or do you think that it goes further back? So this is a lot, but if you could unpack for us the idea of the different types of Muslims and what is an Islamist.
Yeah. We have Islam, which is the umbrella of everything. Don't believe anybody who would tell you Islam is different, is something else than Islamism, than jihadism. Islam is the umbrella. Right. It doesn't mean that every Muslim is automatically Islamist or jihadist. No, the majority of Muslims don't even pray. They don't even pray. They maybe some of them pray on Friday, but the absolute majority, more than 90%, don't pray 5 times a day, and they don't conduct all the pillars of Islam. So Islam is the umbrella, and from Islam comes a heavy dosage called Islamism. It means when you install more Islam in the daily life,
right.
it becomes Islamism. And when you conduct your entire life according to Islam in every aspect, you become a jihadist. So it's exactly like alcohol.
Yep.
It's the relation of alcohol and alcoholism. When you drink a little bit of alcohol, it might be inspiring, it might be helping, it might cheering you up. But when you need the bottle for every single situation in your daily life, then you become an alcoholic and then you become an Islamist. And when the amount of alcohol in your blood is more than enough and it's hijacking your nervous system completely, then you become aggressive, you become a danger to other, and you become a danger to yourself, and that's jihadism. So don't believe anybody who tells you there is no relation. No, there is a clear hierarchy. You have to be Muslim first to be an Islamist. And it didn't start. It's not a modern phenomena like many experts prefer to say. I think it's I know it's politically correct to say, to mention that Islamism is a modern phenomena and it is a reaction to Western imperialism and colonialism. And it was a part of the liberation movement also of the Muslim world from the Western colonialism. No, it is embedded in Islam. And let's explain it. What is Islamism? Islamism is mixing politics and religion together, and using religion as a political power. Let's go to the time of the Prophet Muhammad. We'll figure out that he was not just a spiritual leader, but he was like a head of the state. He was the finance minister of his community. He was a warlord. He was a judge. So he was taking care of all the secular aspects of his community, and he was using Quran passages and orders to justify his behaviors, to justify or to legitimize every kind of behavior. His relationship with women were a part of our legal system today. Yeah. His habits in marriage became moral traits that we are using in our daily life today. So he was different from Jesus. Jesus was a character who appeared only like 30 months or 3 years on the world stage, and he was just a preacher. And then he disappeared before building a state, before taking care of his community or making any social or any political order. But Islam was born as a political order. Politics were in the DNA of Islam since day one. And therefore, it's becoming very difficult. The legitimization of becoming a caliph, like the successors of Muhammad, it was always based on how close they were to the Prophet, if they are from the family of the Prophet, if they are applying sharia or not. So all of that made the political identity of the Islamic world. In fact, the Islamic world until today is still hijacked by two concepts. The concept of Medina, which was established by Muhammad 1400 years ago, and the concept of the tribe that existed before Muhammad. So the tribe and the Medina system both are enemies of modern state. They are both enemies of individualism. They are both enemy of modern secular law, which applies to everyone, which doesn't differentiate between people according to their religion or race.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the Medina system?
Yes. The Medina system was established as Muhammad first was preaching 13 years in Mecca without any success. And his message in Mecca was very peaceful because he had no means to act otherwise. And then he moved to Medina and he made a coalition with some militant groups and, in fact, like some thugs from Arabia. And he started attacking the trade of the tribes, and he started making money out of that. And this is another issue, that the economic system of Islam is embedded in the idea of ghazw, of raids, of wars and war spoils.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in the last 8 years of his life, Muhammad had no job. So the only money that he was getting were the spoils of war. And applying that to every Islamic empire that came after him, that was the main source of income. That you raid the neighboring areas, you take the gold and the girls,
Yeah.
and then you sell the slaves, and you have more money. Then you impose jizya on the dhimmis, on those who are not Muslims, so they have to pay extra tax because they are not Muslims. And this was the main income for the Muslim empires, no matter if it's the Abbasid or the Umayyad or the Ottoman Empire, and or it's Daesh or it's the IS. It's the same system. They have no economy of production, but an economy of war spoils. So this remained in the DNA of the economic system of the Muslim world. But Islamism, as we know it today, came because of a different aspect, I would say. Of course, it's because it's embedded and embodied in the Islamic tradition and the birth. I call it the birth mistake of Islam, because it was born political and it couldn't release itself from this political burden from the time of Medina. And then comes the time of cultural change, the turning points in the Islamic history, and the moments of cultural defeats. These are the moments that revive Islamism again. As long as the Muslim empire is strong and is in control, it loosens up sometimes, and they allow some kind of culture, sometimes of personal freedom, especially in Baghdad and Cordoba. We read that there were more bars back then than in the entire Islamic world today. There were more dance, more poetry, more love of life. So when you have a lot of money, in the third generation, at least, it becomes to loosen up. The sharia becomes deactivated in certain areas, and there is more space for translation, for science, for knowledge. And this is how the so-called Islamic civilization was flourishing in the Middle Ages. Not because of Quran or Islam or because Muhammad was a great scholar. No, it was because of welfare and because of friction and contact with foreign cultures. It's because the minorities that came under the Islamic world, who were educated, who knew Greek language and Greek philosophy and Greek medicine, the Jews, the Christians, the Greeks, the Romans, all of those, together with the Arabs and the Persians, of course, who were also neighbors of the Byzantine Empire and were also influenced. All of this created a cultural mix that was very fruitful. And with the money of the Arabs that started investing in translation and so on, then you had the so-called Islamic civilization, which was not Islamic at all. It was Persian, Byzantine, Jewish, Christian, Arab, of course. It was the openness and the relative tolerance that made possible that those cultures would work together. It was similar to what Alexander the Great has done in the Levante, in Lebanon, this area, mixing up peoples. It's releases new energies and synergies, and it makes culture possible. And culture is always about culture transfer in the first place. But it had nothing to do with Quran or Islam or Sharia. Otherwise, you would have Mecca and Medina as the centers of medicine and philosophy in the Islamic world, but they were not. The centers were in Cordoba, in Baghdad, and in Cairo, where other cultures were dominating this area before and were participating in creating this culture. But in the time of cultural defeat or cultural crisis, and in the time of turning points in history, Islamism shows up as the alternative and as the only answer. When the Mongols attacked Baghdad and destroyed Baghdad, and the Islamic, so-called Islamic civilization was destroyed, and the caliphate was beaten, the Muslims had no answer. And therefore, somebody like Ibn Taymiyyah, a very crucial figure in the history of Islam, showed up and said, I know why we have lost. It's because we were far away from the Quran, because we were so much interested in the chemistry and medicine and philosophy of the Greek, and we forgot the most important book, which is the Quran. And this answer keeps popping up after every crisis we have in the Islamic world. Yeah. In the 17th century, in the 18th century, another guy showed up. His name was Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. He established a movement that we know today as Wahhabism, and he was trying to revive Islam because he noticed that the Islamic world plays no role anymore in the world, that the West is becoming so strong, and he also revived the idea of Ibn Taymiyyah and said, because we walked away from our religion, from Sharia and from Islam, therefore we are becoming weak. Therefore, we need to revive the legacy of the Prophet. And he started raiding and controlling the tribes. And he was repeating exactly what Muhammad did 1100 years ago, like from him. And that keeps coming after the Ottoman Empire collapsed, after the World War First. The Muslims had to ask themselves, why have we lost? Why are we so weak? And then the same answer again, because we are far away from Quran, we have to reestablish Sharia. And this was a unique chance for the Islamic world to join modernity and to understand the lesson that you cannot find solutions in the past, that you cannot work with the same operating system after it's becoming rusty and it's not helping you. You cannot communicate with the world with this ideology. You cannot even communicate as Muslims with each other with the same operating system anymore. But they insist again and again that it's the best that humanity have ever brought out. And that's why Islamism is always revived, because you just need a defeat, like again in the year in the Six Days War, 67, and now in the situation that we are having in the Islamic world, scattered, divided, civil wars. They wouldn't come up with the idea that most of those civil wars are caused by Islamism. No, they would say it's because we were away from Islam, and because we didn't implement Islam the right way. The theory is right, but the implementation is wrong. That's what Marxists are saying since generations. This applies to Islam too, and therefore it's like a snake that eats its own tail. It's a never-ending story.
Absolutely. So now let's talk a little bit more about the Ottoman Empire falling after World War I, and them convening in Egypt and saying, okay, guys, Islam huwa al-hal. Islam is the answer. How are we going to spread Islam? How are we going to do this? realizing that the world was very different, that they can't do the same thing that Muhammad did. They can't do the same thing that Ibn Taymiyyah or, or the Wahhabis did. They have to do things differently. The world has changed so much. Now there's a UN, there's all of these structures in place. So they came up with what we are familiar with, the 100-year plan. Now, you as a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, what were the instructions that you were given? What were the goals of these Islamists? What was the plan for the West?
Yeah.
Or what is the plan? Sorry, this is not past tense.
One of the most important things about the Muslim Brotherhood is their relationship with time. So I heard many times in the summer camps and winter camps I was attending a very interesting sentence. They used to say, the West has the watches, but we have time.
Yeah.
So the West invented the watches that control time, but we have time itself, and our plan is long-term plan. Like infiltrating Islamic society, this is their plan, is declaring Islamic society as a Jahiliyyah society. Jahiliyyah means it's pre-Islamic and like it's the age of darkness, ignorance and dark. Exactly. And the enlightenment, the Islamic enlightenment comes through Islamism, not through reason, not through social contract. No, it's divine power that is given to a supreme leader, and this supreme leader is achieving unity through submission and purity through exclusion. And this is exactly the link between Islamism and fascism. The obsession with the idea of purity, that we have to purify the Islamic body of any foreign influence, of any un-Islamic influence, and we need to achieve our unity through annihilating individualism, through concentrating only on the project. We have a holy project, so there is no time for individual needs. There is no time for freedom. Freedom is a danger. Freedom is a Western concept that, according to their rhetorics, freedom did not achieve unity for the West, but it's achieving only decay. It's achieving only mistrust, and it is achieving only loneliness of people, destruction of family structures, and all of this propaganda that they are saying. And therefore, they're saying the Enlightenment is having a dark side that no one is dealing with. Islam is the real enlightenment because it's giving meaning to the person. And to some extent, I understand why masses of people are going after them. Individualism is a very tough project. Freedom requires a lot of responsibility, a lot of awareness and consciousness. And we, human beings, we are meaning-seeking animals. We need a story. We need a big narrative. We need to be embedded in a big story that gathers us all. We need belonging. And of course, once you look at some parts of Western society and you see this kind of void, identity crisis, and sometimes, of course, also lack of meaning, then you understand not only why Muslims would turn to Islamism. No, you understand also why many Westerners are turning to radical right-wing groups or radical left groups, because they are seeking a big story, a big narrative, a meaning, a community, belonging. And I understand that. I went through that when I joined the Muslim Brotherhood, but it is our task as fighters for freedom and for enlightenment to uncover this lie, big lie, that those radical groups are offering meaning. No, they are using the fascist formula, meaning through silence, unity through exclusion of others who are different, through killing your individuality, and unity through submission and obedience. And this is very dangerous. This is degrading us from being human to being animals, herds of animals, again. And that's what I'm missing now in the discourse in fighting against all radical groups in the West, not just in the Islamic world, that we are not concentrating on this ideology. And this ideology maybe has lost many battles in the Islamic world. The boat of Islamism is actually drowning in the Islamic world,
Yeah.
but the saving boat comes from the West in the name of tolerance, in the name of diversity, in the name of social cohesion, you name it.
Absolutely. I'm just writing this down because that's a quote that we're going to be clipping and sharing. That was so well said. Now, something phenomenal just happened recently. An American group, CARE, are now considered a terrorist organization in the Emirates. So we now have Arab Muslim countries that are recognizing the danger of the American Islamists. So that is to prove your point, to highlight how ridiculous it is that in the Muslim world, we recognize this danger, we're fighting against this danger, and then here in the West, this is where they're finding their life-saving, this is where they can rebuild their power. But let's talk about the goals of Islamists in the West. So whenever people try to speak about the 100-year plan and the goals of the Islamists, they're considered, that's a conspiracy theory, you're being an alarmist. So I want to hear it from you as somebody who was part of the Muslim Brotherhood. What we are understanding is that they have many different ways of trying to infiltrate the West. One of them is through immigration, which will eventually affect the demographics so that they will have greater voting power, and also through birth, through the wombs of the Muslim mothers, right? So same idea, creating more Muslims so that they can have voting blocks, so that they can have more political power, and using secular laws against us, using our own laws against us, which we see happening quite often. So are these truly the plan of these Islamists? Are they really, truly trying to infiltrate the West in a non-violent way through infiltrating media, education, government, or is this a conspiracy theory, or is this truly what it was, that you were taught, or that you were that you thought was the best thing for the world?
It's not a conspiracy theory. Of course, we have to differentiate a little bit. Not every Muslim which is immigrating now from Syria, Egypt, or Iraq to the West is having a plan that he wants to infiltrate the West and to Islamize it after 100 years or after 50 years. But the Islamist leaders who live in the West, who profit from democracy and tolerance and diversity, they know exactly that this is their golden chance. In fact, the rise of Islamism in the West is the result of something very positive in the Western society. We are becoming more progressive, we're becoming more open, more tolerant, minorities are heard, their voice is heard more than 50 years ago. There is chances of participation for them, and you and I are profiting from that as immigrants or descendants of immigrants. But there is a dark side of progress that we need to talk about. That, like, borderless tolerance is very dangerous, especially when you are facing intolerance. Facing intolerance with tolerance is stupidity and is, in fact, it's giving up on yourself and on your society and on your culture. And every society have to have borders. And the politically correct left, and not all of the left, I have always to differentiate, because there are people from the left who are very aware of the danger of Islamism and they fight against it and they fight for women's rights in Islam and all of this. But there are maybe the leading groups in the media, the woke groups, the politically correct, the identity politics, is playing into the hands of Islamists, because after modernity was putting us in a situation to think as individuals, act as individuals, and present ourselves in the society as individuals, identity politics is coming back to tribalism and is encouraging everybody to present themselves as a part or representative of an ethnic, religious, or sexual group. And this is, in fact, is a backlash for enlightenment and for modernity. The postmodern way of thinking is deconstructing everything in the society, manhood and family structure, even gender, and all of these things are creating this void that Islamists are saying, on the one hand, the left is the best friend of the Islamists because it's opening doors for them to participate in the name of diversity. But at the same time, when Islamists are talking about Western societies, they are using exactly what the left is doing and saying, look, they will teach your child at school to be gay. They don't recognize the borders between man and woman. They don't recognize families. They don't recognize any value system. You have to stick to your origin, to your old operating system. So that's one side. There are many reasons why Islamism is getting stronger in the West and why intellectuals and politicians are very reserved or hesitant when it comes to criticism of Islamism. First of all, of course, many are just afraid. They are just scared. No one wants to end up like Salman Rushdie, like attacked on a stage or losing his eye or even killed. No one wants to lead a life like my own. As I talk to you, under my window, 6 policemen are standing waiting for me to accompany me to go to have dinner. When I want to buy bread, I need 6 policemen just to go to the bakery to buy bread. No one wants to lead this kind of life. So people are scared. They are aware that the danger is huge. And some intellectuals are very clever in disguising this fear and making tolerance or diversity out of it. So they don't want to admit that they're scared, and therefore they don't criticize out of tolerance. And there are people who are really tolerant, but it's kind of a misguided tolerance. They don't understand the scale of what they're doing. They are good-hearted people. They don't want to hurt anybody's feeling. They want to help, and they want everybody to have their space and to have their chances in the society, which is great. But by doing that, they are also opening doors for the wrong people who are using tolerance, diversity, and democracy just to annihilate all of these. So whenever I speak to my friends, especially in the left, I'm telling them, let's go back to left values that I grew up with. Like I became intellectually mature through reading John Paul Sartre, the idea of engagement in the society, the idea of freedom, freedom of the individual, the women's rights, rights of homosexuals, like freedom of speech. These are all left values that the left was fighting for decades. Why are all of these values deactivated when it comes to dealing with Islam, especially when dealing with political Islam? So why can't we apply that? We have no problem to criticize the Pope, Jesus himself, to make plays, satires about Jesus, about the church. Why is it progressive to do that, but it's at the same time racist to do the same about Islam and Muhammad? I don't see the point. I am an advocate of equality of Muslims in the West, but to this equality belongs to criticizing Muhammad, painting him, making satire about him, and criticizing Islam. I consider that not only as a human right, but a human duty in the times we are living in, for the sake of women, for the sake of children, for the sake of peaceful living together.
Absolutely. And that allows them to be able to tell the difference, because right now there's such a confusion in the West between a Muslim and an Islamist. They can barely tell the difference between an Arab and a Pakistani and an Iranian, right? So for them to be able to try and figure out the difference between a Muslim and an Islamist is very confusing. It's very difficult, and it's actually very scary. So what you were suggesting here, which is that if we just stand firm with our values, that's how you're going to be able to differentiate, because your average Muslim isn't going to be trying to do World Hijab Day, for example, and trying to, or encourage halal meat throughout the school cafeteria, or, all of the things that the Islamists are doing, the da'wah and, et cetera, et cetera. When you start to stand firm with your own values and say, no, actually, it's okay to draw Muhammad. No, actually, it's okay to criticize Muhammad and the Quran and whatever. Any Muslims who actually believe in democratic values, who believe in free expression, who are your peers, they won't say anything, right? The ones who are going to fight back are the Islamists, and that's how you can tell the difference. But what we're doing is we're providing cover for these Islamists because they hide under freedom of religion, and they say, oh, it's my religion to cut off a girl's clitoris. FGM is part of Islam. You can't criticize me for it. This is my religion. You can't criticize my religion, right? And so therefore people get scared and they say, okay, well, I don't want to be a bigot. I don't want to be an Islamophobe. And so they don't criticize them. And they don't differentiate, they don't recognize that, no, they are just hiding under saying, oh, diversity and inclusion, I'm a Muslim. But in actuality, these are political Muslims or Islamists, and they are extremists and they're fundamentalists, and they're trying to control the other Muslims and eventually the rest of the society that they're living in.
Yeah, maybe therefore, we too in the West, we need to update our operating system too, because these values, as they came up, they were part of the Western experience of the Western people with themselves.
Yes.
With the Western people with the dictatorship that they didn't want to come back, and I am on that side. But we have to know that also freedom, tolerance, diversity have borders. And the European societies became progressive only because they allowed the individual to flourish and to present itself as an individual and to have a certain distance towards the origin and the culture, their own culture, not to denounce this culture, but to see the mistakes and to see flaws in this culture to correct it. So, and you cannot deal with Muslims as a collective. Deal with each one as a citizen, as an individual, give them dignity, human rights, but begin with these individual rights. Why is so important for you to fight for hijab, but it's not important for you to fight for the Muslim girl to wear a bikini and go to the swimming pool and to take part in the swimming hour at school? Why is it okay to make propaganda for this collective culture, but forget about the women who are locked in the West? I receive messages from women who tell me, I live in the same city with you, but I don't see the street. I cannot go out. No one comes to save this girl or to save this woman. No one knows how many times she is beaten every day by her husband or her father or whatever. Nobody is talking about the dreams that are suffocated and the potential which is killed in young girls and young boys, Muslims who are brilliant, who just need to breathe some freedom, to have someone to listen to them, to believe in them. Why are Western progressive leftist women and men and even some feminists, they are becoming advocates, and it's ridiculous. It's perversion of modernity, perversion of the idea of tolerance, when Western white feminists are advocating for the hijab and forgetting the Muslim women who are locked in, whose dreams have been robbed. That's why we need a wider dialogue to redefine tolerance, to redefine diversity. Diversity is not only about colors of faces and religions. Diversity is also about concepts of life. Diversity about diversity of opinions. And I have the feeling that in the West, the corridor of opinions is getting narrower and narrower from the side of the left, which is going to bring us a backlash from the right. And this will create a society where the middle of the society, the moderate people in the society, have nothing to say, and we have to listen to those in the far right, far left, Islamists, to give us the directions, because we misunderstood tolerance, we misunderstood diversity.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Hamid. I really appreciate everything that you said there. And this, it brings me back to when I was a child, 13 years old, and when the child services and, in fact, the family court system here in Canada was aware of the abuse that was happening to me in my family home. And they said, it's your culture. It's your religion. This is the way that your family chooses to treat you. And so they thought that they were being the good guys, right? They thought, oh, this is cultural diversity, inclusion, whatever. But really it's moral relativism, and they think that they're being the good guys by supporting the culture, but really what they're doing is they are facilitating continued abuse. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for everything that you've said. But especially for speaking up for those victims who are being continually victimized by the Western societies that purport to support minorities. So thank you so much. Nobody wants to put people in categories, and nobody wants to say, this kind of person is this, believes in these things because they're wearing this clothes or whatever. But we have to make generalizations when you're living in the world. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to have conversations. And, there are always going to be, I was one of those people. I wore a hijab, but I completely disagreed with all of the homophobia, with all of the anti-Semitism, with so many parts of Islam. I disagreed with wearing the hijab. I felt that it was a misogynist tool of control of women, but I still wore it. You know what I mean? And in fact, if somebody asked me why I was wearing it, I'd say because I want to, because it's my choice. So all of these confusions exist, but I think that that is kind of muddying the water if we're supposed to figure out every single individual that we're talking to figure out where do you stand on this spectrum. It's asking too much. Maybe if we would just encourage people to be more vocal in criticizing anything that they see, regardless of who the perpetrator is of that questionable behavior. So what we do here in the West, which is the most toxic thing, the most dangerous thing, is that we restrict ourselves from criticizing Muslims. And we restrict ourselves from criticizing Muslims because we've been taught that that's a bad thing to do, that's Islamophobic, that's bigoted, et cetera, et cetera. That is the bigger problem. And when we protect Islam and Muslims from any kind of criticism, what we're basically doing is we're fossilizing them in 1400 years ago. We're saying your ways of living from that long ago are okay with us. We don't have a problem with it. In fact, we're going to celebrate you for doing these things, which we have progressed ourselves. Here in the West, we were able to progress because of criticism. And if you are continuing to protect Muslims and Islam from criticism, how will they ever progress? How will we ever get to the point where we do have shared values of freedom of expression and democracy and freedom of belief, et cetera, et cetera?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've been spending the last 20 years of my career doing exactly this, encouraging people to criticize, but at the same time, encouraging them to differentiate between the single human being and the collective, between the ideology and the human being. For me, the human being is in the center, and human beings are different. There is no big mass called the Muslims, the whites, the blacks. There are always all kind of nuances.
I have to interject, Hamid, because there's a very big difference between being a black person, being a white person, and being a Muslim person. There's a very big difference between your immutable characteristics and an ideology that you are following. When somebody says to me, I am a Jehovah's Witness, or I am a Hasidic Jew, or I am Sunni Muslim, then I understand already what their thought process is for so many different aspects of their life. But if they say to me, I'm Jamaican, or I'm German, or I'm Canadian, that doesn't give me any information. If they tell me I'm black, I'm white, I'm Chinese, it doesn't give me any information. But if you're telling me what your ideology is, what your religion is, what your belief system is, that's giving me some information.
Yeah, but still, when somebody is telling me, and I think I'm one of the fiercest critics, not only of Islamism, but of Islam itself. When someone is telling me I'm a Muslim, I still know nothing. Because
you know some.
No. I still need to hear more.
Nothing.
What does that mean? What does that mean? What he is expecting from me by saying he's a Muslim, what he is expecting from the society. If he's just a Muslim who wants to go and pray in the mosque, he has my support. If he's a Muslim who wants to implement any of his laws at school, in the swimming pool, in the society, in the academic world, no, I will become his enemy and I will fight against his project. And here where we differentiate between cultural Muslim, I told you 90% of them don't pray. Many of them, they don't have any political idea what they want in the future. And they can be integrated in our society, but they need to see the borders. They need to see this is what you can do.
That's our responsibility.
Yeah, and we need to do it in this aspect. Here is your chance. You are not accused because you are Muslim, but here are your chances. You have a chance that most of Muslims in the Muslim countries are not having. You have freedom, you have welfare system, you have healthcare system, you have a good education system, so you can make the best out of that. It's the best thing that we can offer young Muslims in this society. It's freedom, it's individualism, it's a voice that they have, and they need to use this voice not just to criticize the Western society, but to criticize their own community, to be free from their own community. If they really want to free, they have to start at home. That's what I've been saying in the last 20 years in my discussions with Muslims who are politicians, Muslims who are conservative, with European politicians. That's how we should do it. By saying you're a Muslim, I learned nothing. Tell me what you want from me by saying that you are a Muslim. Then we can talk. And
Right.
if you want anything beyond what the law allows here, what the values here accept or do not accept, if you want something more, no. I am against discriminating Muslims because they are Muslims, but I am also against giving privileges to Muslims just because they are Muslims.
Right.
Discrimination can go both ways, and we need to focus on humanism and not focusing on building camps where only at the end radical ideas and radical perspectives will just collide against each other. And then at the end of the day, we have Islamists, right wing and left wing, controlling the society and singling us out, isolating us from the debate, and just hijacking the entire debate about how this society should be at the end. And I am scared of any ideology that doesn't respect these basic values that made the United States, Canada, and Europe great, that created a space that we left our homes in Egypt or in Iraq or in Syria and came here to profit from this freedom and from this science and from this culture and public space. And when at the end, in the name of tolerance, we just kill this public space, we just silence the voices of criticism, we are just afraid even to speak our truth, to speak our minds. This is the beginning of a cultural backlash also in Europe, where extremism from all sides will take over and will destroy this culture. We have many challenges, economic challenges, challenges with AI, challenges with aging, with demography, with China, with Russia, with everything. And the only thing we have is the thing that made this culture always productive. It's the competition of ideas, the competition of thoughts, the competition of economic programs, the competition of political concepts, so that the best idea for all of us, not just for one group, will take over and will be in responsibility and make the best for us. But when we stop competing with ideas, economy, or political concepts, when there is only one color dominating, no matter which color, this will be the beginning of the end of the West.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you so much, Hamid. I don't think that this conversation is over by any means. There's so much more that I could speak to you about. The chat is going crazy. There's so many more questions for you, but we have to end it here. I'm hoping you can share with us where people can maybe continue this conversation with you, where they can read your books, or where they can reach out to you on social media, or just share with us any final thoughts that you have before we conclude. What are some last words of wisdom you want to impart on us before we let you go?
Thank you for inviting me. I have a Facebook site that I publish my thoughts from time to time. Islamic Fascism is the only book of mine that was translated into English. I don't know why, like other books of mine are translated into French and Italian and even Korean and Persian and Kurdish and even Bengali. But Islamic Fascism is the only book available in English by now. And I have also a site on Instagram, and I publish some thoughts there. So that's where you can find me. There are some videos of mine in English language too that you can also search for.
The Box of Islam.
Box of Islam. There is like it's like my YouTube channel. It's called Hamid.tv actually, and I have their videos in Arabic, some in English, some in French, some in German. So this is how you find me, and yeah, as long as you are interested in this topic, you will always come across me on the internet.
Wonderful. And Hamid has a Twitter account as well for those of you who are on Twitter. Thank you so much again, Hamid. We really appreciate you sharing your personal story and also your intellect with us today. It was an absolute pleasure, and yeah, just an honor. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye. Thank you for listening, for watching, or for joining me in the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. If today's conversation moved you, I ask you, please don't let it end here. My work is about shining light where silence has allowed suffering to grow. It's about standing up for those who are punished simply for thinking freely, for questioning, for wanting to live their truth. If this matters to you too, please help me keep going. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share these stories, and bring more people into this conversation. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can donate or become a monthly supporter through going to yasminemohammed.com. Your support helps me keep producing this content, engaging in advocacy, and reaching those whose voices are often silenced. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to join me, to join the conversation, and to share these messages so they can reach even more people who need to hear them. Your voice, your engagement, your support, they truly make a difference. Thank you for standing with me, for choosing courage over comfort, and for helping build a world where freedom of thought is not a crime. Until next time, stay brave, stay loud, and never stop questioning.